Welcome, everyone. Good afternoon. Thanks for joining us today. My name is Lauren Williams, Adult and Community Services Manager for the Columbia Public Library, and I'd like to welcome you to today's Lunch and Learn, co-hosted by the Library and the League of Women Voters of Columbia Boone County. And today we're going to be exploring the Americans with Disabilities Act, as 2020 is the 30th anniversary of this historic legislation. I just want to go over a couple of Zoom housekeeping items before we get started. If you hover over your Zoom window with your mouse, you should see the chat icon and some other tools either at the bottom of your screen or the top, depending on whether you're on a computer or a tablet. And if you're on an iPad or a phone, you may have to tap in the middle of your screen for those tools to appear. Look for the chat bubble, and you can use that chat to ask a question of our presenters. And you can do that during the presentation. If there's a question about something someone has just said, you can go ahead and you don't have to wait till the end of the presentation to ask your question. We are also recording this presentation, so it will be available in the next day or two on both the League of Women Voters YouTube channel and the library's YouTube channel for future viewing. And now I'd like to introduce today's moderator, League of Women Voters board member, Barbara Hoppy.
Thank you, Lauren. Welcome everyone to our December 8th Lunch and Learn program. This year, as Lauren said, celebrates the 30th anniversary of the Americans with Disabilities Act. And we are very pleased to have 3 members of the Columbia Disabilities Commission as our guest speakers today. They will present information about the history of and the current state of the ADA and hopefully include some of their personal experiences and perspectives. And before we begin, I wanted to just let everyone or remind everyone that we have another program with the library coming up this Thursday at noon. It should be really good and very important for everyone. Opinion and misinformation, and that's noon on Zoom, Thursday, December 10th. And then Friday, at 7 p.m., December 11th, we have our annual Founders Day event, which should be really excellent. And we will be giving out the Outstanding Citizen Award to Stephanie Browning and Scott Clardy of the Health Department. And then also the Liz Schmidt Community Service Award to the Vote Boone team and the Boone County Clerk's Office. And for both of those organizations, very important and hard work during this year. And I also wanted to let people know that we have the Lunch and Learn programs for next spring, and the first 2, one January 12th, Tuesday, will be on the economic impact of COVID in Columbia. And then on the February 9th, Tuesday, we will feature the United Way Equity Challenge. And with that, just before we begin our program, I would like just to take a moment of a silence to remember Andrew Twaddle, who, excuse me, was a longtime League of Women Voters member, and he died recently of COVID, and it's very sad for all of us. So if we could take a few minutes and a few seconds, and then we'll go to the program. And with that, Renee and John and Lydia, we look forward to the program today.
Thank you, Barbara.
Okay. So do you want to go first, John? John, you're muted.
Oh, actually, I thought I would listen to your slides first, Renee, and then chirp in as we go along, if that's okay.
Okay. Well, the slides, I think I thought I would fill in some details so that we didn't have to with the slides, with some of the details about the ADA, about the different titles and how that works, so that hopefully people will take some of that.
Okay, so would you
And
like me to just start? Yeah.
so, yeah, what?
Yeah, sure. Okay. Well, my name's John Bowders. I am a Columbia resident for 22 years, and I am a professor of civil engineering at MU. And let's see, I have 6 years ago, I was injured. I was paralyzed from the chest down, and my prior 57 years, I was able-bodied and very mobile and very active physically. And so it came as a big shock to be learned to live my life in a chair. Prior to my injury, I thought Colombia was one of the flattest places in the earth. And after my injury and having to motor around on my manual chair, I realized that I was very glad it was flat, but it was not flat. And I quickly and continuously have gained a much, much different perspective for people with disabilities, especially mobility issues, but others too, and some of the hurdles and challenges they face just in day-to-day life. I consider myself fantastically lucky because I have a lot of advantages that others with disabilities do not have. And I have a lot of resources that others do not have. So it makes my life pretty easy. In the meantime, in learning many of the things that I'm still learning, I have a desire to try to engineer things that are, I'll use the term universal design, even though I don't necessarily like that term, because some things that are, I'll say, ADA approved or for universal design aren't really universal, because everyone's disability is very different. And some things that work for me don't necessarily work for someone that has a different type or of disability, or even the same disability, but just they're not able to do some of the things that I can do. So I'm very anxious to see our city, Columbia, advance beyond the ADA so that we have an inclusive city that's open to everyone. And what I've seen over my short time of having a disability is that when we design facilities for the least abled individuals, it's many, many other individuals who end up benefiting from that, whether it's designing just on the simplest things as ramps instead of stairs. There are many people that can negotiate a ramp a lot better than they can do stairs. And I wouldn't even call them having a disability. It's just that's how they're physically equipped. So my goal is to try to push Columbia to engineer things in a manner that's includes everyone. So.
This is Lauren. Sorry to interrupt. We've had a request that what's written on the slides be read out loud so that if someone is just listening on the phone or has a visual impairment, they could know what's on the slides. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So Renee put up a slide that the current slide says disability gain. And it's a definition here. It's a personal benefit of disability or a policy that's intended to include people with disabilities, but provides unexpected benefits to, I'll say, non-disabled people. And I know just this recent election cycle, I think I saw Brianna Lennon's name in the audience, is that we have quite a few new voting machines that are really much easier for disabled individuals to use. And I noticed that people without disabilities were using those machines as well, because I think they were just more friendly to use. So that disability gain, that would be an example of a disability gain where maybe something was intended for disabled individuals, but everyone benefited from that. So
it's like strollers and curb cuts.
exactly. Strollers and curb cuts, curb cuts for people that have a difficult time maybe stepping up on a curb and or negotiating going down. And I think Lydia may have had experience with the new voting machines as well.
Yes, absolutely. And that was one thing that I was going to touch on a little bit too, kind of doing my presentation.
Okay. Well, I don't have anything more specific to say, and I'll just certainly add what I can as we go along, and I'm open to questions from anyone. There's pretty much no question that I wouldn't answer, so feel free to ask. I think of our panelists today, I am the one with the most recent, maybe disability, where, like I said, I was injured when I was 57 years old, 6 years ago. Prior to that, I didn't think about ADA at all, basically. Curb cuts were there where they were there. That was nice. I didn't actually need them, but now access and curb cuts are really important to me.
John, this is Barbara Hoppy, and
Yes.
we do have a question for you. And I also want to just mention to people, if they don't know it, that John is an engineering professor at MU, so he brings a special expertise as well to all of this. One question we have is, are there public buildings in Columbia that are not accessible to people with disabilities?
That's a great question, and I think that might have been Renee that said lots. And what I have to say is most of the places that I wanted to go or needed to go have been accessible, but many of them, the accessible entrances or accesses have been after the fact of the building. I mean, the buildings, especially like on the university campus, maybe 100 years old. And of course, they had never been designed for mobility issues or accessibility. And since really 1990 in the ADA, almost all the buildings have been made accessible according to the definition of, okay, you have to be able to wheel in there. But if you would just take Jesse Hall, for instance, the accessible location is in the basement of the building. So one has to circle the entire building to the south entrance, then go underneath the stairs into the basement of that building, take the elevator if you need to go to a different level. And that's not the most efficient, and it depends on your disability. But if you're on the north side of the building at the quad, say, it can take quite a time to find your way around to the south side of the building and gain the entrance. So while many buildings are accessible, they're accessible by definition, but not by ease of everyone. I don't think any able-bodied person would walk the whole way around Jesse Hall to enter it just because they could use a ramp at that end. I mean, they just go in the normal stairs or whatever. So that's always going to be an issue with older facilities and infrastructure, is how to retrofit and make those facilities universally accessible to everyone. So that is an issue. The university has a pretty forward-looking and advanced policy for trying to make buildings more and more accessible. But like everything else, it's a great expense. And but we do have a good team in our campus facilities planning that are constantly looking at how to make the university facilities more accessible. And we have a similar group. There is a similar group also in the city government. Adam Cruz sort of leads that effort. And yeah, so there are inaccessible places, and guess what? People with disabilities learn that, and they just don't go there. So.
And there, John, there was also a comment that a viewer said older public school buildings are not accessible. Do you have any insight on that?
I do not have the insight other than my dear friend and role model, Chuck Graham, who passed away this past June, May, end of May, beginning of June, was very active with the school board and school system to look at accessible facilities in the public school system. And through him, I knew that there were some serious issues about accessibility and access to different programs in the public schools, but I have no firsthand knowledge of that. I'm hoping that we can have someone pick up that banner that Chuck was carrying and continue to represent the disabled population with respect to the public schools. I don't know who that is or when that will happen, but I sure hope that happens soon.
I think it's
Thank you.
that-
Okay,
Okay.
Renee?
Yeah, Kate and Jackie both have kids who are in the public school system.
Right.
And Kate was Chuck's wife when he died, Kate Graham.
Yes.
and her son has a disability and he uses a wheelchair, and Chuck was teaching him a lot about what he was going to need to do. And that was, I think, had a lot to do with his motivation originally for getting involved with that, with the school system, was to make sure it's open to Sky, his stepson.
Yeah, I expect maybe Kate will continue those.
I think
Yeah.
I think she will.
One thing I was going to kind of chime in with is since I recently graduated from Lockbridge High School, I personally don't have a lot of experience with wheelchair accessibility. But I know also for folks who are blind and visually impaired, one thing that's kind of ongoing work in the school system is getting proper Braille signage installed. Like on classroom and restroom doors, things of that nature.
Yeah, that's hugely important. And I'm glad you bring personal experience to our commission.
Yeah, thank you.
Because that is one thing I have wondered.
This is Barbara, and we have 2 more questions, and you can either deal with it now or if in the course of the hour. One, what is a very good one. What was the reaction in the disability rights disabled community when the ADA first passed 30 years ago? And how should it be updated today?
Well, first of all, let me address the passing in 1990 of the original bill regulation. And at the time, of course, I did not have my disability that I have now. And so that whole effort pretty much passed by without much notice on my part, unfortunately. However, last year, I did watch the film Crip Camp. I don't know if those in the audience have seen that. It was at the film festival last spring, well, some time ago. And that film is available now through the internet. And Crip Camp really shows the development of the struggle to get the American Disabilities Act. And sort of the climax of the film is the passage of the ADA Act. And it's pretty easy to tell the excitement of the individuals at that time across the country who have worked so hard to get recognized. And I think the something that really impressed me was the crawl to the Capitol, where all the individuals with disabilities actually climbed the steps to the nation's capital to emphasize the need for accessibility features. And even though then on your question, how should it be updated today? I just heard today, as a matter of fact, that a new legislature in the state of legislator in the state of Colorado has been voted into office. However, the Capitol is inaccessible, so that now the state is making some rapid retrofits so that the legislator can actually be a part of the government proceedings there. I think similar facilities exist in our state, in Missouri, and probably in many other states. But as I said before, people with disabilities learn pretty quickly where access is difficult, and then as best possible, avoid those places if at all possible. And that's really not what we want. What we want is for infrastructure to be accessible to everyone and not exclusive to some people. So I think going forward, we need to continue to stress the importance of ADA and the ADA infrastructure guidelines, and then improve upon them. We had an incident earlier this year where American Airlines decided that they would not accept power wheelchairs over a certain weight onto their airplanes. They didn't want to, I'll say, hassle with them. Fortunately, all that was brought to the attention of the public and some legislators, and American Airlines changed their policy back to accepting all chairs, not just those under a certain weight restriction, so forth. That really, if someone with an adaptive device, whether it be a chair or something else, is not permitted to use that device, then that limits their freedom to move around and so forth. So that's really critical to keep those parts of ADA or add to the ADA if needed. So we have to be ever vigilant, I would say. Otherwise, many of the gains or some of the gains that we've made through the ADA could be lost very quickly.
Thank you. This is Barbara Hoppy again, and we're just about at the 12:30 mark, and there was a comment to make sure that all the speakers had time to speak. And there was also a question about explaining the effort to repeal the ADA. And again, you can take that during the course of the program. Whatever works best for all of you to get everyone in our time allotment.
Oh, I will
can
mute myself and turn it over to Lydia and Renee. Thanks.
Well, there have been efforts to roll back ADA through the courts, which was what made the 2008 amendments necessary. There was a case that had ruled that a person would not, a disabled person who used a prosthetic was not eligible for ADA protection because of the mitigating measure. And so because of that, that one, I remember when that happened because having epilepsy that can be medicated in some instances, but not always successfully. But that meant that I could be interpreted as being successfully medicated by a court, whether I was or not. So so that was when they updated the definition of disability.
And with that question,
clarify it.
With that question, they were wondering why was there a move to repeal it and who was promoting the repeal or behind the attack or a repeal?
Okay, that is something that I don't have a lot of knowledge on. I just know that through the years, it has been a consistent effort to roll back these protections too. And I would say a lot of times it would be business leaders and insurance that that have to sacrifice the most because of ADA and try to challenge it.
Great. And there is also a question about what the Disabilities Commission is working on now, but again, you can take that during the other two sections or at the end.
Sure. So I will kind of add my thoughts to that. I would say that well, first of all, we have a lot of things that we work on every month. There are a pretty wide variety of items on the agenda. I know a lot of it, of course, is primarily related to the city. But I know in my experience this year, we have worked on things like finding ways to remember Chuck Graham, who we have discussed a fair amount. And then I know we've also talked about accessibility in the community, like in regards to sidewalks, and then also that kind of tied into some like trash pickup and just things that might obstruct sidewalks and kind of hinder accessibility. So those are a few of the really big things. Just basically our main goal, I think, is just to make the community as accessible as possible and inclusive to everyone.
Yes, we are also looking at getting involved with youth mentoring. I was on the Governor's Council on Disability, and we had a youth mentoring program that Lydia actually took part in, which was called the Missouri Youth Leadership Forum, where we taught, we had an application process, and that was accessed statewide by youth who were seniors or recent graduates or juniors in high school. And we taught them about government and made sure they understood about the ADA, and they were able to go and do a mock session at the Capitol. Did you do that, Lydia?
Yes, that was a lot of fun going to like the House and Senate chambers, and then also I think we went to the governor's mansion. I'm pretty sure. Yeah. So those were definitely some fun things and very informative.
Yeah, I think it's very useful because a lot of us grew up in our families. This is the only one with the experience, with a minority experience, especially those of us who are white, like myself. So our experiences don't match that of our parents. So it's one thing we have in common with LGBT community is the lack of generational transfer of the knowledge of what it's like to live in a world where you're not one of the preferred, you don't have a preferred body or a preferred level of ability. So it's really useful for youth to be with each other and share those experiences. I was very fortunate because I grew up around amputees. I had a cousin who was an amputee, who was a Vietnam War veteran, and it normalized disability for me. So that when I grew up, or when I acquired a disability, when I was 14, I could see it as a sort of normalcy. And I was also informed by being left-handed, because I was, I had a teacher who really bullied me on my smear marks across my page. And it's, it allowed me to connect with the possibility of just doing things differently, using our bodies differently, and how that's just a functional and difference, and that sort of prepared me to understand the social model of disability, which sees it as a that natural human variation, like sex or race or handedness, that it's all just a different way of being in the world.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
I was going to say we have about 20, a little more than 20 minutes left. I didn't know if we wanted to move, if Lydia had any prepared remarks that we needed to cover before we go into further questions.
Yes, absolutely. So yeah, first of all, I just want to say thank you for having me on this panel. It's truly an honor to do this today. So just to kind of get started, a little bit about me is that I was born here in Colombia. I recently turned 19, and as I previously stated, I am a Rockbridge High School graduate. Some things about me are that I am blind. I'm also deaf in my right ear. I have no sense of smell at all, and an impaired sense of taste. And one thing also about my vision is that I do have light perception, but I'm not able to see things such as like shadows, colors, things like that. And in terms of my hearing, I primarily have a hard time hearing speech because it just sounds fairly distorted and muffled. And then I also wanted to briefly touch on just some basic resources and things that I use. So a really big thing that I use just in the community getting around is my cane. And that basically helps me avoid running into obstacles, and it helps me locate things that are in front of me before I run into them. Another big thing that I use is Braille, which allows me to read things, and then also I can write in Braille too. So it's basically a tactile way of reading and writing instead of seeing print visually. Also, to help with my hearing impairment, I wear a hearing aid in my right ear, and it does help some, but not fully. Mostly it just makes sound feel more balanced. I think a good example would be for those that use like contacts or something. It would be like, you know, if you had one in one eye and didn't have one in the other, it would feel kind of awkward. And so I got that about a year and a half ago. So that has helped some. Another thing that I use, and this will become important later in the presentation, is I use screen reading software, which can be found on many like phones, computers, tablets. And that basically is just a program that reads out loud what is on the screen. so that I can access the digital information. And I think also we have kind of touched on what the ADA has meant to us as a nation. Of course, it is worth noting, I have not experienced life before the ADA. I was born after its establishment. But for me personally, I feel like it overall has just reduced discrimination within the community and has made things, for example, like voting in Boone County more accessible and inclusive. And as we've talked about too, there is still a lot of work to do, but I would say that the ADA has definitely helped considerably. Now, one thing is that I wanted to touch on today is voting in Boone County, as I said, and that has been inclusive to me personally because of the talking voting machines that are available. And for those who are unfamiliar with them, they are basically a digital device that reads the ballot out loud. And it's kind of tricky to describe the physical machine, but it's basically a square shaped device with buttons on it that you can use to make a selection and things like that. And so when you make a selection for a candidate or an issue on the device, it will mark that on the ballot. So that's a really easy way for me to participate in the process, just as people who are sighted would, with that same level of privacy. And I think we've already kind of touched on the idea of disability gain. But I would say that the voting machines are definitely an example of this because I know, like, when I went to vote in this past election, I had to wait because there were other people who were not visually impaired using it. So I think it can help a lot of people, like, for instance, individuals with different reading disabilities and even just people who find it easier to have the material read to them. I know that that can make life easier for individuals sometimes. And then,
Oh,
go ahead, Sally.
a viewer wrote asking that we recognize that Mobility Worldwide, formerly PET Project, PET, started by Reverend Melvin West a little over 20 years ago here in Columbia. And he said to date, over 65,000 mobility devices have been made by volunteers and distributed worldwide at no cost to recipients. So he was responding to your point of the device. That's the device you were using also, right, at voting?
Oh, well, I know I used the voting machine, like, you know, it would read it out loud to me. I'm not sure I quite understand the question, but that's wonderful that that many devices have been made available to people. Let's see. So I was talking about voting in Boone County. So I also want to touch on voting nationwide. So I know there's a lot of awesome opportunities for people to vote and good polling places that are very accessible and things like that. But I know, unfortunately, in my experience, I have found out that there unfortunately aren't many talking voting machines always available at polling places. Like I said, there are definitely some, but that's still kind of some ongoing work, making that readily available nationwide. And as a result, people who are blind, sometimes when those machines are not available, would have to rely on someone else to fill out their ballot for them, which of course is a privacy issue. And certainly I feel very lucky to have the ability to use the talking voting machine, and to not have had that experience. But I just wanted to put that out there, that that is kind of some continuing work. And so because of that, organizations such as the National Federation of the Blind, or NFB, are actively working on advocating for more inclusion as it relates to voting nationwide. And another thing I wanted to mention is that, because I know many of us researched ballot issues prior to the election, so I just wanted to touch on that real quick. For me, it can be challenging sometimes, but there are some easy ways to do it. The main challenge that I experience is that some websites are not screen reader accessible. And for those that don't know, it basically just means that the talking software is not able to read aloud certain portions of the screen because of the web design. So it might just say like button or link or something instead of saying what that button or link is exactly. And then a big thing, an important thing to realize too, is that of course it's wonderful having all this technology, and it's so I know Title IV of the ADA does require that websites be accessible, but I know as technology is advancing so fast and it's so helpful, the one challenge is that it can be difficult for some engineers to design things in a way that's inclusive. And then
designed with the assumption that people will see, that people will be using all of their hearing and their sight.
yes,
And the ADA came first, so it should have started out conclusive. The ADA predated the internet, but it
right.
didn't go that way.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think that's the thing too, is that, there are some, companies and things that they're just like, they just, for whatever the reason may be, do not make it accessible. But a lot of times what I find is that they really want to, but they just don't, they're not sure how, or, that didn't come to mind. Like they didn't think of accessibility when they were originally designing their site or app. So as it relates to voting, I know a couple examples of both accessible and inaccessible are, it's like the Boone County Clerk's website is accessible, and that really helps me because that allows me to access things like information about my polling place, and also it allows me to view my sample ballot in an accessible format. I know, unfortunately, though, there are some accessibility issues with different sites that contain information about candidates and issues, not like the Boone County Clerk site, but like I know Ballotpedia is partially accessible. And so when a site is inaccessible, it contains information that I'm not able to read, like about ballot issues or really anything else in life, I then have to ask someone who is sighted to read the information to me. And so, but I do want to stress too, like, that there are a lot of really good accessible sites out there, but that's definitely some continuing work, is just access to technology and making that inclusive to everyone.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
those
look,
were, oh, go ahead, sorry.
I think that a lot of that relies on candidates and advocates for the different campaigns who promote the ballot issues, and they one thing about I read an article in Forbes about how um, elections could be more accessible. And they really stress the importance of candidates taking responsibility to reach everyone and include everyone.
Yes, absolutely. I think that's definitely a crucial part of it, for sure.
Yes.
So yeah, that was pretty much what I had prepared to speak on today about voting. So yeah, I'm definitely open to any questions that anyone has, and certainly feel free to just ask anything that you want to know. It's definitely not going to offend me or anything.
I had two questions. I'm sort of interested in your take in use of the trail system and the park system in Columbia, and whether that's an asset uh, to both you and the Disabilities Commission. And I'm also interested if you've used the League of Women Voters website, and we would be really interested in having feedback if there's something that we can do better on our website to access people with disabilities and make it easier for them to get the information that we have on the League of Women Voters website.
Sure. I would say in terms of the website, I will be honest with you, I haven't had a ton of experience with it. But just going through some of the things that I have on there, I haven't really found a lot of accessibility issues. So thank you for making that inclusive. But certainly I will reach out if there's ever something that I find that could be better.
Great. And have you had an opportunity to use the trail system, or do you have a perspective on that in the park system in Columbia?
Yeah, so I personally, I don't really go on trails and things that often, but I do sometimes go with my mom. I know they they're fairly accessible to me personally. The only thing, of course, with trails is, kind of rough terrain. It can be tricky to know, like, oh, there's, a big rock or something there, right? But I know that can't really be helped. I mean, that's part of a trail. But yeah, it's definitely a nice place for me to go and just kind of walk and get some fresh air, just like anyone else.
Stevens Lake Park should be a good one.
Yeah, yeah, I definitely enjoy
Paved.
walking there. Yeah.
I know they, several years ago, they put in a ramp so that people could get into the lake and out of the lake easier than going through the sand if that wasn't accessible. So I've known through the years that they've tried to make adjustments to make it better for
Yeah.
everyone, actually. Yeah.
Yeah,
I was
absolutely.
just talking about that recently, that I would like to see publish a book that coordinates the transit system with the trails, so that people know what buses to take to get to the trails.
Actually, Renee, you know, this came up, the whole transit system has come up many, many times. And
Yeah.
as far
Yeah.
as transit system access to trails, I know it's very, very limited. And unless someone can generally find their way to and from the trail on their own or with some help from someone, the public transit is just not very useful to going on a trail hike. I use the trails 4 to 5 times a week. Well, the main trail I use is the MKT trail down by Twin Lakes up to Providence Road, and then going away from town a little bit. I use that trail 4 or 5 times a week for some exercise. And it's really a godsend for me. And the whole trail system is fantastic if one can get there. And I think that's an issue. The whole public transportation system is a huge issue for everyone, but especially for people with disabilities in our city. And I know that the transit folks that are involved in the city manager are constantly thinking of how to improve the system, but again, it's a financial issue as well. So I did want to jump back, and there was the question about things that the Disability Commission is doing or has done. And I just wanted to make sure that, you know, one of the things, if anyone has an issue with accessibility with any kind of business in the city, they can contact the Disability Commission, and the Disability Commission, as a first step, will investigate and write a letter to the business owners or facility owners about what is the issue and then the correct way to do that. And so it's sort of a nice reminder of how some businesses either didn't think of these things or were maybe ignoring them. So that's one of the things. The commission also worked a long time to get 3 grants for the taxi systems in Columbia to partially fund 3 accessible taxis for the public, and I think that worked out really good. We've made many contacts with the city about really, I'll say, accessible sidewalks, but this includes everything from snow removal to pavements that need repair or need replacement. And then we were also very active on the new Farmers Market Pavilion up by the Arc, and where the architect for that facility actually worked with members of the commission to make sure that that facility would be fully accessible. We also have been working with the airport group on the design and planning of the new terminal to make sure that it's fully accessible. Let's see some other things. Yeah, so that's a few things that the commission has been working on and continues to work on. And there was a question also about common ADA violations. And just from a personal basis, I think one is ADA accessible restrooms that are not. And many businesses will have a restroom and have the standard little accessibility symbol, usually a wheelchair there. But many times, depending on the type of accessibility, those bathrooms are not accessible. So that's a common one. And then blocking of accessible entrances, especially for businesses that maybe don't get a lot of disabled traffic. So sometimes those entrances become storage areas for things. And I've actually been guided through kitchens of restaurants to get into buildings because their accessible entrance was blocked. And then the parking, there's a parking app now. If you see an ADA parking space that's obviously being violated by a non-disabled vehicle person, you can report that very easily through an app. And the Disability Commission was a leader in promoting that development for the city. So those are just a few things that the commission has been involved in.
Yeah, definitely. And I would just stress again to, like you said, John, just if anyone ever has an idea or something that they think really needs to improve, please do bring it to our attention. I mean, that's what we're here for. It's just to make the city of Columbia more inclusive.
Thank you. We're just about out of time. I wanted to get to two more questions. The first question came early in the program. If Lauren is still on the line, has to do with the library and a person who said that a friend of theirs with cerebral palsy was fired by the library decades ago, and what the library practice and policy is now regarding disabilities. I didn't know if Lauren wanted to speak a little bit about the library and that issue, as well as just disabilities in the library in general.
Sure. Well, I can't really speak about specific employment situations years ago, but I can say that we are committed to being inclusive in both our hiring practices and then in terms of making the library facilities themselves welcome and accessible, and have done within the last few years an ADA study. I know that we have challenges on this site. You talked about buildings on the campus, and when the library was redone, we did a survey and people really wanted it to stay in this spot, but we have challenges with that. So our ramp is probably longer than we would like it to be, but we have we did the ADA review, made some changes. We have mobility scooters. There's a buzzer at the end of the ramp at our Columbia facility that people can ring, and we bring a scooter out to them. We have wheelchairs available as well as walkers. Our outreach services provides materials for people who are homebound for whatever reason. And we also work with the Wolfner Library for the Blind. And so we are committed to inclusivity and diversity. We've gotten better. We still have a long way to go, just like other people do. So like I said, I can't speak to that specific instance, but we are committed to inclusion. And so likewise, if there is something that at one of our facilities that makes it difficult for someone to access library services, we certainly want to address that.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much for sharing that. And we'll get to this last question. And that is, do you find that 30 years into ADA, and this is for the panelists, do you find that most businesses and establishments understand ADA requirements? If not, what requirements do you think are the least well understood? And that's for the panelists.
Sure. I would say in my personal experience, I think it's a really mixed kind of pool of businesses there. I think that some do and some don't. And it really depends on it depends on the particular issue that has arisen and what they understand and don't. I would say, generally speaking, the biggest thing is kind of understanding, like we've talked about, the idea of like, yes, it's technically by legal standards accessible, but it's not good in terms of ease of access. So I would say that is a really big thing that I
The
personally experienced.
one phrase I would have I picked up lately is that it may be um, accessible, but not necessarily welcoming all the time. There's a there's a real distinction between whether and it feels not like you're not necessarily welcoming into a place if there are stairs. um, so
Yeah, it's
there's
sort of in legal terms, the spirit versus the letter of the law.
right.
So we've run over our time a little bit, and I just want to thank Lauren Williams of the library for co-hosting the Lunch and Learn program. I want to thank our speakers, Renee Powell, John Bowders, and Lydia Olmstad for sharing their knowledge and experience with ADA. And thank you so much. And we look forward to future improvements in the ADA, and let us know how we can get involved and help. Thank you.
Thank
You're
you.
welcome. Thank you.
Thanks for sharing your knowledge.
You're
Thank
Thanks,
you.
everyone.
Good.